Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special mini episode of Bankroll Burners, the poker podcast for players that can't stop getting it in bad. I'm Mike,
And I'm Josh.
and we're doing something a little different for this shorter episode. Josh and I were recently in the same place at the same time, which proves we aren't the same person for anybody who was wondering. And we played a hand against each other in an otherwise pretty uneventful nitty table at Encore Boston Harbor.
And I will
And
say, it wasn't the worst table of all time, but the people who are bringing the action are right here on the camera. As
that's
is
right.
tradition for an Encore Boston Harbor, or not for Encore Boston Harbor, but really for our poker careers. One of us did poorly and one of us did well. And I'll leave it up to your imagination until we get through this hand, which really comprised a pretty big swing.
Absolutely. So this is an exciting one. We're gonna dissect each other's thought processes in this hand, and I've in the few days since this hand, I've thought about it more, and I have some different thoughts than I did on the day of, and some stuff I'm pretty excited to get your take on. But yeah, let's dive into it. For those who aren't familiar with us, Encore Boston Harbor that we've talked about on this podcast before, the 1-3 game, which is what we were playing, has a $500 cap, which is pretty nice, I would say. Let you be a little deeper.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've kind of touched on this before, how, you're really a 2-5 reg at home at this point. But really, I mean, part of that is because you literally can't be a 2-2, player for any sort of meaningful profit when the max buy-in's only $200. You could always make the trek down to Best Bet Jacksonville, I suppose, for the $300 max buy-in, but at that point I'd still just rather play 2-5 for, $500-$600 a buy-in. And I've even been thinking about, trying to make a more sustained push into 2-5. I feel like I've done a lot of studying and could definitely make that push, but would still probably be buying in for, this roughly the same amount I do at 1-3. So it's just, buy-ins are weird and make stakes complicated.
Absolutely. Okay, so in this game, I believe we were about 500 effective. Is that right?
Yeah, I was the effective stack at 450. So I'd had a couple, lost a couple small pots basically. Had one and lost. It was a little bit of that sort of swing. As you guys know, we are always happy to put the straddle on. So in this particular hand, we're playing 1-3-6. Mike, of course, has thrown on the straddle. And this is just the sort of table where even if we're the only ones straddling, which we were most of the time, it was really necessary just to kind of encourage any amount of action or opportunity to get the money in by the river if we had a strong hand.
Yeah, I agree with that. So that's what we were doing. And I believe you were in the hijack.
I was in the low jack,
Low jack.
I believe, and I have 10 of diamonds, 10 of hearts, and I open the action up to 20, which is my standard open with no limps in a straddle pot.
Pretty standard.
Josh opens LJ with TT to $20, and this is the sort of 1-3 table it is. It folds all the way around to Mike in the straddle.
And I have a fairly standard defend with Ace of Hearts, 3 of Diamonds. I think that's, definitely on the lower end of my defend range. I don't really enjoy playing Raggedy Aces, but and I think if, you could make an argument versus a UTG open that this should be folded, but I would say from an MP, like a low jack, I think you probably have to just call this, especially for basically a 3x open.
Yeah, I mean, it's a spot where certainly some people you could also just fold it if you think their opening range is quite strong, but you know that we've gone over my opening range many times, and you could have me crushed. You could have my King 3 suited absolutely crushed.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I know you're mixing it up in there, so I'm happy to get in there with you with my Ace 3 offsuit.
And now, so we're going to go to a flop. I'm going to put it around 40 because, I mean, the rake does matter a little bit. Obviously, Encore also added another dollar taken out of the pot to fund their promos, which are possibly the worst promos I've ever seen. But we don't need to get to that.
I just want to say really quick, these promos, it's not even real money. They give you money to go play blackjack, and you have to play an even bet game. It's not even a real promo. If you hit a high hand, it's you have to then go down to the blackjack tables on the other floor and put a couple bets in. It's what the hell is this?
It's just silly. But anyway, The flop now is going to come out quite favorable for my range, if not my hand. Ace of clubs, jack of diamonds, deuce of spades, ace jack deuce rainbow. I'm holding red tens. Mike has got ace three offsuit, so outdrawn once again.
Yeah, get good. So as Josh said, this flop does smash his range. It's a double Broadway board. It's pretty much a mandatory c bet for him, and I know that. There's absolutely no merit to leading here, and so I do it. Go ahead and check.
And I decided to size up on this flop. Just sort of something I'm experimenting with is on these boards that are so favorable for my range, where I can really have so many strong hands, and my opponent is quite capped. You know, I think Mike probably doesn't have a lot of ace jack. Definitely won't have any aces or jacks. You know, best hand he can really have is, you know, pocket deuces and then like ace deuce, mostly offsuit. Probably some suited ace deuce as well. I mean, given he is in the straddle, closing the action heads up. But I like to take kind of a larger size, as I can also have ace deuce, I can have aces jacks, ace jack, also a ton of draws, so I bet 25.
Yeah, and I actually I did take a note of your sizing when you did this. I did think it was, I don't know that I agree that you would want to size up on this board. I think if it was something like ace six deuce, I do like a larger bet. But with ace jack deuce, you're letting me get off easy with like sixes through threes. I could just fold, you know, when you size up
That's
on a board like this.
That's true, but I think a big reason that, you know, you can use larger sizings, and maybe this isn't a board where I should be doing it. You know, it's possible that like maybe I want there to be a flush draw and like be able to take a larger sizing, you know, because you have more hands that you can defend. But on a board where I have such a strong range advantage, you know, there is merit to sort of, you know, taking only larger sizings because you want to be able to get all the money in when your opponent does have a hand that can call down.
Yeah, and that's fair too. I guess we got to think about. So we talked about $40 in the pot, and you have about $430 in your stack. So you are going to need to do. You aren't going to be able to go like 1/3, 3/4, for example, to get all the money in. It won't work. So you do need, if you want to get all the money in, you do need to be doing things like sizing up on certain streets. Personally, I would take a smaller flop sizing here in your spot, but I do understand your reasoning.
Yeah, and I think probably like if I'm gonna go for a larger sizing, then tens probably becomes a check. And maybe it's just better to be c-betting 100% of my range for a smaller size. Certainly, and that's kind of something I was thinking about also after the fact is, oh, you know, if I want to take a large sizing with the hands that I am betting, maybe this particular hand should be going to my checking range. So.
Yeah, that too. And also, if you're taking a larger sizing with only your stronger hands, then you start to be blocking a lot of the stuff I can call a larger bet with. So
yeah, I just think it's one of the. I mean, you know, obviously, in general, betting frequency and bet size should be inversely
absolutely
proportional. So
agreed. Yeah, I guess I was mostly just trying to advocate again for a smaller sizing on this flop, betting a large volume of hands with the smaller sizing.
Which I think is okay. I think it probably is fine either way. I mean, especially, but like I think polarizing, you know, hands like good draws, right? King queen suited with a backdoor is like an excellent bluff here.
Definitely.
You know, queen 10 similarly, like I mean, honestly, like a king 10, queen 10 might even be better because they block ace 10, which is like your best defend, really, you know, your best one pair defend. But anyway, we could talk on and on about flop bet sizing, but there's a whole hand to do, and so I bet 25, and I mean, I assume there's no other option in your head but call.
No, definitely not. You know, I don't think I have any raises on this board, maybe at all. Like I probably have some if you take a smaller sizing, but when you do size up like this, I might just play my entire range as a call. I mean, am I ever raising like deuce here? Or am I going to wait till the turn? I mean, you're very likely to fire a second street on a board like this, so I could wait till the turn to check raise and just play my entire range as a call. I don't know what's better. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd probably just like calling here and then evaluating the turn, because like if I bomb the turn, you might not even want to raise deuce depending on what the turn is. I mean, you might just want to play like a call if I'm just trying to play for stacks with like big bet.
Right. I mean, Yeah, and I might have to, if you go big bet and then you big bet turn and I just call, I may have to like look at river and look at potentially leading certain rivers as well.
Yep,
Too,
true.
if it looks like something you might check back. So okay, but I kind of just think that when you take a big sizing like this, I mostly, possibly entirely, just want to call, and that's what I do. Obviously, I have top pair. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, so we got about 400, a little over 400 behind now. There's about 90 in the pot, and the turn is going to roll off, I think, the pretty interesting card, and here's where a big decision point comes in, as the King of Diamonds rolls off on the turn, which brings in a backdoor flush draw, as the board is now Ace, Jack, Deuce, King, with 2 diamonds. And Mike checks it over to me, which I think he's always going to do on a king turn to the preflop aggressor. And at this point, I think as I sort of review the hand, I think I make a slight sizing mistake here. Basically, what I kind of think that I just have a premium bluff candidate at this point. I think it's one of these situations where, sure, I do have showdown value, but the hands that I'm beating I'm just going to wind up bluffing with the best hand, and I'm probably not going to get more value when I want to be sizing up on this turn. So I basically elect to say, hey, I've got 2 tens, which now, if he called me with a gut shot that's picked up a pair, he's not going to be too happy. If he called me, and it's hard to have a gut shot that actually connected, given that I have 10-10, which double blocks queen 10.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I want to hover on this a little bit. So,
absolutely.
I think there's a pretty key point in the hand. I mean, as you say, you are double blocking the nuts here. Of course, the nut straight is queen 10. I very am unlikely to have the nuts. I mean, I do defend all combos of queen 10 from the straddle, of course. So
absolutely.
I have 8 possible combos of queen 10, but that is a lot less than 16. So,
I mean, and I also block like ace 10, which is, again, as I said, kind of
Yeah.
definitely your best one pair continue.
Absolutely. So, and I was going to bring that up as well. So you're blocking a lot of my strongest hands. I do think it's a good bluff candidate. I do, and you don't have a diamond.
I think I do have a diamond, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I thought you were 10 of hearts, 10 of spades for some reason.
That may be.
Yeah.
I knew I had tens, but I think maybe I didn't have a diamond. So
that was my recollection. I don't know that it matters. I mean, you do want me to have a diamond because that way you unblock the call folds.
Yeah.
If you're looking to structure this as a triple barrel, I think not having a diamond here is very good because I can have things like 10-9, where I'm maybe sticking around and then folding river or something. But I think it's interesting to say, like, well, maybe I'll just take my showdown value, in position. I do think that I think against a very passive player, it might be worthwhile to check it back here and take some showdown value. But versus me specifically, I could probably put you in some uncomfortable spots on the river if you check this back.
Right, it's definitely something I was thinking is, if I check back this turn and the river bricks and he bets, like, I probably have to fold. Like, I'm pretty fine. And like, the other thing is, I am pretty, like, there's so many strong hands that I can have on this board. Like, I can have queen 10 suited myself. I can have king jack, ace king, ace deuce. There's so many, like, very queen strong 10. Hands. What?
You can have the straight, obviously, too.
Yeah. I think I said queen 10, but I think I said I'm more. I mean, I have fewer combos of queen 10 certainly, because I think I'm only opening queen 10 suited from the low jack. But exactly, I just think there are so many strong hands, and having such good blockers. I guess my thinking was, like, it's going to make your defending quite difficult because your range, like, between you just I guess I had thought at the time between you just calling the flop, but really I think it's fair to assume you could just call all with pretty much your whole range. I don't know if you would have just called deuces there, but we definitely think about it now. It makes it a little less attractive to triple barrel with a hand like this, given that you could have a super strong hand as well.
Well, I don't necessarily agree. With that, it's because, think about it, like, I can have deuce, I can have ace jack sometimes, I can have king jack sometimes, but by and large I won't. Like, my range, you have to remember, I called out of the straddle. Like, right. My range is super wide. Like, yeah, I probably am folding like sixes through threes in the flop, so maybe I don't have hands like that, but I can certainly have sevens, eights, nines.
Jacks,
Um,
random Jack X.
yeah, and I can absolutely have Jack X. I can have, yeah, like we said, like 10-9, although you block that. But yeah, I do think I can have a lot of hands here. Like, you clearly have a nut advantage, and
Yeah,
the
and I
range.
was thinking even a hand like Jack X, or even a hand like I mentioned, like a king high float with a gut shot or backdoors or something, is definitely going to fold by the river. And like you like and I think this another part of the reason why I decided to turn this hand into a bluff is because out of the straddle, I think you just have so many like like Jack X, King X that just won't be able to hold on, and even some Ace X probably won't be able to hold on.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get to that. But definitely so. Definitely so. I agree. I agree completely. And I will also, just something you mentioned to me that I don't want to miss out on here is thinking about structuring a triple barrel, because I do believe that when you were in the moment, you were planning to fire a third barrel when you fired the second barrel.
Well, yeah, I think it doesn't really make sense to bet pocket tens on the turn for like a large sizing and then check and then like give up on the river, because it does narrow your range somewhat when I bet a large sizing on the turn.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the sizing you actually took
So
here?
the sizing I chose was 75 into 90. And I think I should have gone bigger here, because this kind of set up like an overbet on the river that was like kind of a weird sizing. I think it was like 320 into 240 or something. It was like 130%. And I feel like if I had potted it here or done a slight overbet here, like bet 100, that's like a more geometric bet size bet sizing across streets that I think is just a bit more. I don't know. I mean, it's a more compelling story, and I think it just makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I agree. I also think if you're thinking here, like, okay, I'm gonna bet, I'm gonna overbet river. You really want to, like, river overbets are more polarized than turnover bets, is my understanding. So like, you can turn overbet pretty much anytime you have the nut advantage, but I think river overbets, you have to kind of have like super nuts advantage. Like, I can't have the nuts,
Right.
whereas I think in this configuration, I have enough nuts here that like river overbetting becomes like a little more borderline, because I can just have queen 10 and play it this way.
Well, and that's why I mean that's why I feel like this combo. I mean, if I'm going to river overbet as a bluff, this is certain. I mean, I definitely have to do that
Yes.
with like tens or like queen jack or jack 10, but double blocking the nuts becomes a lot more appealing if we're kind of reducing the nuts to queen 10. But I mean, I
100%.
think I mean I don't know. I kind of felt in the moment that I would that I would kind of take a similar line for value with like pretty much any two pair or better hand.
No, and I think that's fair. I don't think you're like, especially because the overbet isn't too extreme on the river that
Yeah.
you're thinking about doing at this point anyway. Not that we're there, but you're planning right now to overbet jam river, and thinking about that. You know, I agree. Like, you do have a very strong net advantage. You probably would play thick value similarly. I guess more what I'm saying is I think your alternative line of geometrically going pot is better.
Yeah,
That's
and I kind of realized that after the fact, and as we had a conversation after about a different hand in which you had said you wish you had used a geometric bet distribution, and that kind of made me realize, oh crap, I didn't need to go 75% pot, 135% pot. I could have gone 100 here, and then that would have set up basically a 300 into 290 bet on the river, which is just a little bit better. I think a better distribution.
Yeah, and just to clarify for our listeners who aren't familiar, geometric sizing is when you take the same percent pot sizing across multiple streets. Typically, people talk about it as turn and river, but I've heard sometimes people talk about going geometric for all three streets too.
And I think also, geometrically sizing also kind of refers a little bit back to the flop as well, where sort of geometric sizing is really is also kind of a reference to how the size of the pot is drastically affected by each bet you make. So, where I was kind of saying on the flop, I wanted to bet big because I want to bet big with all the strongest hands of my range to make sure I get all the money in. Because if you bet small on a flop, then you won't, when you're at a certain stack depth, you won't be able to just get the money in going bet, bet, bet. Whereas
Right.
as you bet larger, that means that all of your future bets can also be larger but and still be a reasonable portion of the pot and not like a disgusting overbet.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and the logic behind that, as I learned recently, is betting geometrically forces your opponent to defend with the widest possible. If you can get all the money in betting geometrically, you force your opponent to defend each street with the widest possible portion of their range, which
Right,
is
and that can kind of lead to good value because they kind of show up with a lot of like random top pairs that they feel compelled to defend on the river. Can also help your bluffs because they felt compelled to call down with some medium draws, some pair plus draws, things like that otherwise might not have had the equity to continue to future streets.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, something you just sort of have to take on faith that when you're sort of studying poker, that just sort of you realize it just comes true as you play. But something you have to take on faith is that your goal when playing balanced, which obviously you don't always need to play balanced at low stakes, but your goal when playing balanced is to put your opponents in an indifferent spot where it's just like, it's so close the value of calling or folding, and they're just very likely to screw that up.
Which is why we always laugh when we hear low stakes players say, "Man, that guy's so tricky. He bets whether he has it or not."
Oh my god.
Well, anyway, so enough about my bluffing here. Let's hear your perspective on this turn as you're facing down a $75 bet into 90 with ace rag with a 3 of diamonds, which I think you've convinced me doesn't matter all that much.
Yeah. Just to talk about diamonds here really quick. Like, obviously, you might say, oh, I don't want to have a diamond here because I want Josh to have diamonds. But I think the 3 of diamonds is literally irrelevant. I don't think he has any hands he opens from the low jack that contain the 3 of diamonds other than ace 3 of diamonds or pocket 3s sometimes. And neither of those hands would play this way. So, yeah, I just basically have ace rack. And, I have to call here, unfortunately. Like, raising makes no sense. I'm not going to get any value from better. My hand is from worse, rather. My hand is way too strong to turn into a bluff. It is top pair, but I'm cognizant of the fact that the river is likely to be uncomfortable for me. I know that Josh could shove. I also know my thinking in the moment was that if he doesn't shove, I'm almost certainly calling, which I don't know if that's what I thought on the turn when you bet. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I also think there's a decent chance that it just goes check check on the river and you win. Like I
Right.
totally agree. This has to be a call on the turn, And then as you get to the river, I know that like Bart Hansen likes to talk about this a lot, where he says like, oh, when you're out of position, you can like check fold a lot and win a lot because opponents check. And that's less true when you're facing someone a little bit more aggressive, which I strive to be. But, if you're facing a lot of live regs, you can check fold like top, like I think is an example that he's used in the past, because if it goes check, check, you just are always good.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's true. I mean, for sure, if this goes check, check, I win. I know you're going to value bet any hand better than mine. Other than, I mean, you may not, I guess you may not value bet like a7 suited. That would be an example of like, again, you might value bet. So, but by and large, I actually think you probably would value bet that hand, to be honest. So I don't know, but at least sometimes. So I think by and large, if this goes check check on the river, I'm gonna win. I have to defend the turn here, so that's what I do. I flick in the ball.
Perfect. So Mike defends as I think everyone thinks he should. If you're folding top pair on the turn against someone who even pretends to be competent, which I still may not fall into, then stop folding your top pairs against players who are thinking. I'll call myself a thinking player because it's pretty ambiguous.
Yeah, we're thinking players here on Bankroll Burners.
So that for those curious leaves a pot of about 240, effective stack of around 330.
Yeah.
And the river is going to come a giant brick. It is the 7 of clubs. It's an offsuit 7. It completes no draws. It bricks out the flush draw. And Mike lead jams into...
I don't do that. However, I do think Is there? Or I guess I want to ask: is there any consideration to blocking here for me?
I mean, maybe if you're gonna like bet fold, then it's probably fine. But then at that point, I would just probably check fold. Do you get called by worse here, right? That's kind of the key to block betting, right? If you bet 50 here or 40 or something, super small, do I have enough like King X here? Am I betting King X on the turn?
Right. No, I don't think you are, at least not for that sizing. So, oh, actually, I guess you might for that sizing. If it was like specifically, I guess you might do it with King Queen, although I
I'd
feel like
probably
you would
check
also,
back
you
probably
probably
all
check
my
back.
King X that I stabbed with on the flop. I'd think.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't think there's really any consideration of blocking. I just wanted to, put
It's
it out there.
it's
But yeah,
interesting, but it's weird because I just have as we mentioned, I do have quite a hefty range advantage,
and nut
and
advantage.
like I can just jam like all my value
Yeah.
in your
And I
face.
also do think, by the way, that you even have a bigger nut advantage here because I would raise a good chunk of my queen 10 and deuce deuce on that turn when you take that sizing. I wouldn't raise them always, but I would raise them sometimes. So I do think you have a pretty strong nut advantage here. You could even argue that it's enough of a super nut advantage that it just makes sense to rip it in and put the screws to me. Which if you think about it a bit, is what you do.
I do, yeah. So Mike checks it over to me. I decide to jam. I mean, I do think that he would have raised two pair or better on the turn, which really caps his range at like one pair or a missed flush draw. I think I can get most one pair hands to fold, and I think that, and obviously, and I mean, we are beating flush draws, so maybe there's
Yeah.
some merit to checking back and like going to showdown. But again, as we kind of mentioned on the turn, I do think you just have a ton of like king queen king 10 that was a gut shot that paired up the turn that has to fold. It's probably some sticky jack X, especially if you kind of also had a gutter or some sort of additional equity.
Yeah, like queen jack, sure.
Yeah, queen jack, jack 10. I think you can have every combo with those as well. Obviously, we double block jack 10, we double block king 10, but we also double block queen 10. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I rep such a strong value range.
Absolutely. So yeah, I like your shove. I really do. I didn't like it at the time. I was sitting there. I mean, I kind of went through it out loud as you heard. I was like, well, you have so much value here. I was like the first thing that came to mind was like, well, we're dealing with aces, kings, uh, jacks, ace king, ace jack, king jack,
Ace queen.
ace queen. Sure. You can. I mean, I think it's. Is it too thin to jam ace queen?
I don't know. I
Close.
feel like if we bet geometrically, it would be fine to jam ace queen, which is
Sure.
kind of
Yeah.
another great reason to bet geometrically. Because like if we had bet 100 on the turn and get just called, like I mean, it is more the interesting thing about the geometric bet is because it would kind of be a slight overbet on both streets. It does kind of cut down on some of your raising combos, so like we could value own ourselves a lot more if we went that route with
Mhm.
like ace queen. But I don't know. I feel like jamming it. In the moment, I was thinking I would jam ace queen here.
Okay, fair enough. I think it's probably it's cuspy, but I think you could probably do it. So anyway, yeah, you have a lot of things that crush me, and then I started to think like, what bluffs do you even have? And my first question I asked myself is, would you turn a jack into a bluff? And my conclusion in the moment was no. I'm starting to think that that's perhaps wrong. Would you turn a jack into a bluff
It's
on the
quite
turn?
interesting because I really like pocket tens is just like my best bluff here by like a lot. Because
Yeah.
I also like the thing about having and this is not something I was really thinking about in the moment, but something I've thought about since is having a hand like Queen Jack or Jack 10 not only beats some of your jacks that like got sticky, but
Mhm.
also blocks those jacks that got sticky and unblocks all of your ace holdings. Whereas the tens they block some jacks, but I think like you actually have quite a wide given that you were the straddle, you have so many like Jack X suited that you're probably like shrug calling pre-flop.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, yeah, I think, and I can continue with some jacks on the turn, probably. I don't know, maybe, but yeah. So at least some. So I do think that like you probably aren't bluffing the turn, like just structuring Queen Jack or Jack 10 as a triple barrel most of the time. I guess it doesn't seem very likely to
I'd
me.
probably agree. I think it would be Like you actually like Queen Jack actually beats some of the value portion of your continuing range. Like value, like the made hands. I guess I'll say.
Yeah, like I would probably continue on the turn with Jack 10 most of the time.
Right.
So if you have Queen Jack, you're feeling good.
Right, exactly. Queen Jack and Jack 10 are actually doing okay there. Pocket 10s loses to all your paired hands and also unblocks at least more of them than having a Jack does, although it does, blocks it does block Jack 10, King 10 as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess so my thing was probably right. You aren't turning a Jack into a bluff. So I was like, okay, what are the bluffs you're likely to show up with here? So I started like thinking like Queen X of diamonds, like if you're playing like up and down queens, suited queens, but you're probably not playing that many of those.
Right, Queen 9 suited is probably the widest I'm opening from the low Jack.
Yeah, that's probably about right. You can probably mix some Queen 8 in there once in a while, but for the most part, probably better to stay disciplined.
Well, you know
So
me, Mr. Preflop Discipline, they call me.
that's right. That's your name. So I don't think you have that many of those. And then I was thinking like, well, of course there's 8 9 of diamonds and 6 5 of diamonds, but the 7 cuts. Are you always bluffing with like 7 6 and 7 8 of diamonds, or are you checking and giving up when you get a pair and you hope you win to you beat like my misdraws? So, and I don't know what you would do there, but I think probably it depends, right?
It does depend because it's like that's the other thing I was thinking in terms of good bluffs is like tens also like doesn't block the diamond draw, which is great. But I mean, obviously it does beat some of your diamonds too. But like you might have to fold like ace X of diamonds,
Right, which would be interesting. So yeah, so I guess my conclusion here was there weren't a ton of bluffs that made sense. But then I thought to myself, well, Josh is a clever player. He might have something here I'm not thinking of, which I did not think of pocket tens to your credit. So,
well, I don't know if that's credit or detriment, but
yeah. So then I thought to myself, okay, well, I thought about it from this standpoint. It's like there's not a lot of bluffs, so that leans me towards fold. Because I guess I should preface all this with like ace 3 offsuit is close here, man. Like I just want to say it's close for sure. Like my first thought was this is close. It's not obvious either way, at least to me. So this is why I had to think this through so much. So then I thought, okay, what better hands do I have to call with? I can have the straight sometimes. I can have deuces sometimes, but only sometimes. So those hands, okay. And then I was like, okay, well, I can have some 2 pairs, right? I can have King Jack, Ace Jack. I will have sometimes here. I don't have Ace King.
yeah, you can have ace deuce and ace 7 for sure.
Yep, definitely that I could show up here with. So, so I can have some 2 pairs. But then again, I mean, like something like King Jack. I thought to myself that I don't know that I would rather have King Jack than Ace X, because Ace X blocks more of your value range, of your thick value range. It blocks aces, Ace King, Ace Jack.
Well, then King Jack is kind of the same.
If you would play it that way, what?
Well, but King Jack blocks more, right? Because King Jack blocks blocks multiple sets as well as the 2 pair. But of course, there is the well, we could talk diamonds too if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's your I think something you brought up in terms of defending is if you have like an ace X with like a middling diamond, that's like that's like a much worse hand, and like ace 3 in ways beats that. So I wonder if you'll explain that reasoning for our listeners.
Yeah, I definitely thought like if I have ace 8 of diamonds here, I need to fold because I'm blocking some of Josh's bluffs. I'm blocking the 8 9 of diamonds. For example, or ace 6, I'm blocking the 6 5 of diamonds or the 6 7 of diamonds, or if he would play it this way. So I don't want to have those hands, so I would fold those. I kind of went through the combos after we did this, and it seems like, given that you overbet and I don't have to defend that many hands, if I defend, obviously, all my sets, which there are very few, all of my 2 pairs, which there aren't that many, but there are some, and then
Queen 10.
Queen 10, of course. If I defend all of those hands, I start to look at it starts to be like the top 30% of my range-ish, something like that. And I don't. And since if you had bet pot, I need to defend half my range. So since you overbet, I need to defend less than half. So if I defend all my like strong hands here, I actually am. I'm still overfolding, but not by a lot. So I do need to defend some ace rag, uh, and I don't know what percent. Maybe it's a quarter of them.
And
You know,
ace
something like
10, I
that.
mean, and you know, you do have ace 10 also if you're for talking. I mean, and ace 10 is not quite ace rag, but it is, you know, it is certainly if you have ace 10, you know, your best one pair hand, not only in terms of value, because it doesn't really matter what your kicker is with the range I'm representing, but blocks a lot of, but blocks queen 10.
No, no, and this is a good point actually. When I did this math, you know, you guys will have to trust me on this. I actually did consider ace queen and ace 10 as like clear defense in that
Okay,
top like,
good.
25 to 30%. So I appreciate
Yep.
that clarification. I forgot to say that. But yes, I did consider those as like I'm going to defend that hand. So I was mostly looking at like ace 9 through ace 3 exclusive of ace 7.
Yep.
You know, because I do show up with all of those hands and I have a ton of them.
Sure.
That I show up with those hands in the river. So I'm obviously folding all my king X and all my jack X. You know, that's easy. So yeah, I don't know. It may be 25%. I mean, I didn't write everything down and do it all on paper, so it might be that I need to defend half my ace X. It's definitely not more than that. It might be as little as like 20% of them. It's somewhere between 20 and 50%. I could have randomized, and you know, maybe I want to defend one quarter and call that good. You know, something like that.
Sure.
I don't know if that makes some sense.
Did you also keep in mind that you might be raising some of your thickest value on the turn and take out some of those combos from your river defending?
I didn't when I did the math. So, and I don't really know what I would probably raise them sometimes. So that's why you know, maybe we need to defend half our ace X. It's
Yeah,
certainly
just
again,
maybe it's a
certainly not more
third, maybe it's a half. I see your point, but you know, want to make sure that you're not, you know, that we don't swing too far the other direction because, of course, you might not. I mean, and maybe it is okay on a board like this to just play even, you know, queen 10 pocket deuces as call, call, call.
Yeah, I think it is to be frank. Like I don't know that I would necessarily do that, but like would I find that in game? Would I come to that conclusion? I don't know, but I do think that that's an acceptable line with those hands. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a lot closer, but in game I came to I had what I think is something of an erroneous thought, which is, well, I just must have tons and tons of hands I get here with because I defended from the straddle, so I guess I have to call my ace X. But I don't really think that's true. I
Right.
don't think I ended up with that.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that, you know, on our drive away after, and we're just thinking, well, you know, yes, obviously you're defending the straddle super wide, but like a lot of that wide range is going away on the flop, a lot of that wide range is going away on the turn, and now you're actually not left with a super wide range. You definitely have a lot of ace X. You may still have some super strong hands, you know, based on, you know, my sizing and the texture of the board, and you know, you might, but based on the sizing, you also might fold some of those like worse hands. So your range winds up being actually pretty condensed by the river. So, you know, probably is, you know, when you have sort of no middling diamond, you've got an ace, and you're like, well, my kicker doesn't matter. Let's, you know, flip a coin, pick some percentage.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I should have done. But what I did instead was say, well, I think I have too many hands here, so I must have to defend my ace X. So much to Josh's sadness, I did flick in the calling chip.
And it was a great call. I thought, you know, I'd probably get a lot of folds from ace X, but, you know, I should have known the player I was against was too much of a station.
Yeah, exactly. I am a station. It's true. I'm so bad at making these folds. So
You did randomize. Your randomizer was just stuck.
Yeah, exactly. My randomizer almost seems to come up the same way. But no, I mean, very well played hand by you, and certainly if I had, there's a lot of hands I'm folding there. Certainly all my king X and jack X are going away. So
Yeah, so I mean, I'm definitely happy with how I played it. You know, it's important, and to those of you who have trouble finding bluffs, don't be results oriented. Just because they call and are at the top of their range, or settle up, you know, flip a coin and land on call, doesn't mean that you made a bad bluff. You know, you got to remember, got to think in terms of ranges and not in terms of hands, especially in live poker when you only see so many hands and you may only get a chance to make one big bluff in a session. Those things can weigh on you when you think, damn, he called me with his he flopped the nuts and called me like, what a terrible bluff. That
Yeah.
not necessarily true, and make sure you don't fall into that line of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like for the most part, I make a lot of profit in low stakes games by just bluffing a lot. I mean, we talk about these bigger bluffs, but just even the smaller ones, it's you don't get lazy. There are certain spots that you're supposed to bluff, so bluff. If you get called, rebuy. But you gotta be taking them stabs.
That is exactly what I did. I mean, Mike give me change for my fresh black chips, and we had a great time.
Yeah, and I bought Josh a drink at Encore where the drinks are free. So, but I gave the waitress a tip. So there you go.
So too bad the drinks didn't cost money and don't cost money anymore. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this special edition of Bankroll Burners. Be sure to tune in normal time next week for our next full episode. But wanted to share a fun and exciting hand that we got to play against each other, which is one of the first times, maybe the first time since starting the podcast that we sat at the same table. I guess maybe Philly, but one of the only times we've gotten to get tangled a bit.
Yeah. No, there was in Philly when you stacked me for my last like $100 because I shoved with like King Jack or something. Yeah. Um. So. But yeah, absolutely. This was a blast. Everybody, if you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this hand and how you adapt to playing with people who their strategy a bit more. So, until next time.
Have a good night.